Hello, everyone. Welcome to Josh's Boxes. My name is Josh, and today I want to give my thoughts on this game right here. So, as you might know, the last two videos I've posted on my channel have been all about this game, the Mecha Hack. And the idea behind the Mecha Hack is it's a role playing game where you play as giant mecha, robots. And in the last two videos, I have created a character and planned an adventure using the rules found in this game. And I've had the opportunity to run a session with this game. And so I'd like to give my post session impressions for the Mecha Hack and see how it, just talk about what I thought about it in play. So overall, this will be no surprise if you watch the other two videos, but I really liked this game. I was really, really impressed with the way that it handled while I was playing it. Overall thoughts are that it is a very, very smooth and fast experience. I prepped the one shot that I ran in just 15 minutes. I made up a bunch of characters. There were originally 6 people that played with us, but we ended up only having 5 that actually played through the game. And in all, it took us, 3-4 hours maybe to run through the whole session. So pretty standard, but everyone who was in the game was really impressed by how fast it felt. There was one who had some experience with D&D, and he kept saying, wow, this feels so much faster than D&D. And it achieves this in a number of ways. I think that the first way that it accomplishes this is with the roll under mechanic. If you're not aware, it uses a roll under mechanic where you have a stat and it's like a 14 or an 11 or whatever, and you have to roll under that with a d20 in order to succeed. This makes it very clear to players what they need to do to succeed. If you just have to tell them what stat they're testing, and then they do it. And there's very little decision on the GM's part of having to create skill challenges in their mind and deciding, oh, should this be a 13, a 17? Boom, it's already on the character sheet. And so that makes things a lot faster, where the characters automatically know what number they're shooting for. Another way that it accomplishes this, especially in combat, is its initiative system. Essentially, it's structured as if you roll mobility, and if you succeed on your mobility test, you go before the monsters. And if you fail, you go after. So easy. Even with 5 players, which is a little bit more than what I'd normally run. I prefer, usually 3 players. So easy. So easy to keep track of, okay, this is the group that's going before monsters. This is the, 1 or 2 people that are going after monsters. Who wants to go first in this group? Who wants to go first in that group? And they can decide it amongst themselves. And this also gives opportunity to strategize of, oh, well, I'll use this ability and that will pull them close, and then use this ability and it'll push them back, and then it'll be their turn and they'll be out of range. And like, there was really cool strategy that was going on as they were working together within these 2 initiative spots. So I think that's another major contributor of why it feels so quick and smooth. I think another thing that makes it so easy to handle on the table is that the characters are very simple, right? You have 1 ability from your pilot and 2 abilities from your chassis, and then everything else is just rolling stat tests. And maybe you also have a module. So I guess in all, you've got 4 abilities, unless you have a bunch of modules, but the basic character has 4 abilities, and it's very easy to keep track of them. You don't have to scan through your character sheet, look through your spell list, look at all your, your items, read through all your abilities. There's just 4 of them. Super easy. So the players can look in, oh, I want to use my cloak ability. Boom, and there it is. And I think it's things like this that contribute to why the game runs so well. At least in my, in this one experience, it felt a lot faster than a normal D&D game. And there's some specific things that I want to get into a little bit that I noticed that are not necessarily good or bad, but I think make the system kind of interesting. So the first one is that the Scout chassis has an ability called Cloak. There's the Scout chassis, and they have this ability called Cloak, where they can turn invisible, and that's so powerful. My players, I had 3 scouts, and all 3 of them were using that ability all the time, and it wasn't to the point where like I was getting mad at them or they were like trying to bend the situation to like, oh, well, I want to stand right behind them and then sneak. Like it wasn't to that point where, the players were pushing my limits, but it's just a really powerful ability to be able to turn invisible. So they were using that all the time. And I think that was a, ability that got a little bit more attention than the other abilities, like we also had a brawler in the party who they have an ability where they can leap forward and close the distance to strike someone. And I don't think that ability was used one time, just because it didn't come up. But the cloaking ability came up a ton. So that's a really prominent ability that you should expect at your table if you play this game. Another thought is that the roll under mechanic is really simple, but it is super brutal because the stats are determined randomly in the base Mecha Hack game. I had one player that had really good stats. He had like 15s and 16s and 14. Like he had really, I think he had like 1 8, but he had like a 16, a 15, or 14, like super good stats. And so he did really well. He succeeded on most of his attacks and ability tests and stuff. And I had another player who their highest score was an 11, and they had like 9s and 7s, and they did not succeed very often. And they were a little bit less engaged because there was like a significantly lower chance of them succeeding than another player. And so if you have low stats, you'll definitely feel it in the game. And that's something that is unfortunately a drawback of the simplicity and straightforwardness of Roll Under, is that your characters can really super suck. Of course, these players still had fun, but there was a marked difference between the players who had, 13s, 14s, and the players who had 8s and 7s. A mechanic that I really loved as well was the reactor die, which, you're assigned a die and you are asked to roll it during certain abilities, or if you take critical damage. If you roll, like a D8, for example, if you roll 1 or 2, it downgrades to a D6 and then a D4, and then you're out of commission. And it adds this really, really cool risk reward mechanic where like, oh, I can use this cloaking ability, but it will make me have to roll my reactor die. And in most of the time, my players thought it was worth it. So they were rolling the reactor die all the time, all the time. And so I had players that were like out of commission. I think it happened 4 different times in this one session where they were out of commission and had to lose their next turn because they'd overheated because they used their reactor die so much. But I really love that risk and reward of, I don't know, in this situation, I don't know if it's worth it, but in this situation, it super feels like it. I'm going to push it. And the fact that they can push it and be rewarded with, oh, boom, I rolled an 8, I'm totally fine, or oh man, I rolled a 1 and I didn't really need to. And so I think that adds a really interesting dynamic to the game. The one thing that's a little bit hard about it is each player was having a little bit of a hard time remembering where the reactor die was, and there's no way I could remember everyone's reactor die with 5 players. And so that was one thing where people were like, was I at a D4 or a D6? People were like, oh, I think you're at a D4. And so that made things, a little bit more complicated. One final thought I have, as you probably noticed by the last video where I prepared an adventure for this game, is the game master section has like everything. Like it's just some simple roll tables, but it's got like literally everything that I would need to plan an adventure. Like there are dozens and dozens of sessions worth of material in these roll tables, and like you might run into like 1 or 2 similar things, but there's enough variation, and like they're specific enough to like give you a cool idea, but they're vague enough where even if you rolled the exact same things, it would be easy to customize the adventure to be doing something else. And then one section that I kind of failed to give a lot of attention to was the optional rules that are after the roll tables. The boss fight advice is super good. Like getting 2 turns per moment what made bosses really powerful. And there's really good advice for skill challenges and how to add environmental hazards and stuff, and what to do with like downtime between missions. And so it's like 2 pages of optional rules right there and right there. But super like good stuff. Like that kind of what punctuates this whole system. Is it's like very simple and easy to grasp, but it's so much for what it is. It's like it's just a roll table with 10 entries, but every single one of the entries is really interesting, provides a really compelling goal, and it's very different from the other 10. And so you get this huge variety and customizability in such a like incredibly simple package. Like it's amazing the things that Absolute Tabletop accomplished with this game. I think that they should be very proud of themselves for it. um, the only other thing is, there's like every monster has a hit die. um, so it makes it very easy to tell like what the strength of the monsters are relative to each other. But at least in this book, there aren't any guidelines for, oh, you like a party of 5 level 1 players would be good against like 2 or 3 hit die 1 monsters, or whatever. I would have appreciated a little bit of guidance on how to use hit die as a benchmark for gauging difficulties of the encounter. But that's super mild. I just, I used like a hit die 3 or 5 or something when I was battling these guys, and it was doing a lot of damage. But I don't know. Maybe that's what they're trying to accomplish. Is like they don't want encounters to be super balanced. They want it to be focused on the story. I don't know. But super minor gripe, wasn't even really a problem. It was more in like a planning problem than like an in play problem. But super super small. But let's see. Speaking of the stat blocks, though, like they're so elegant. Like it's so nice that like boom, you've got 4 enemies on one block, and each one has interesting abilities. And it's like at a glance, you can look at this and know everything that you need. There's not like a ton of fluff text and a ton of stats and derivative stats and speeds and stuff like that that just don't really matter. Like I just really love the simplicity of the stat blocks, and that made running the game a lot easier on my end. So those are my post-session impressions of the game. um, I obviously am very impressed with it. I really really love how it turned out. I would be happy to run more games. This is a game that actually makes me want to run games in it, which is sometimes pretty difficult because I get burned out as a DM pretty easy. But not with this game. I would love to run like a weekly session of this, and I think that I have the tools to do so. So that is everything. That wraps up all of my thoughts for this initial Mecha Hack test drive. In the future, this is definitely not the last that you'll hear of this session or of this game, sorry, because Absolute Tabletop has released a companion book called the Mecha Hack Mission Manual, which adds new pilots, new chassis, pre-made adventures, a ton of variant rules. It adds a lot to the stuff from this book, um, and even fixes some of the problems. There's a really good standard array of stats in here that would have totally solved my problem with how brutal having low stats could be by just letting people choose a standard array of stats. So this is a super good book. I will definitely talk about this one in the future and create some characters, plan some adventures, and give some thoughts on the mission manual as well. And I also, maybe later on after I've test drived a lot of books, I might do a deep dive and go into every single pilot and chassis and like really dig into the stat blocks of different monsters and the rules and stuff. A deep dive, as the name would say. This was just like an initial, more surface review. But if I get a chance to play this game pretty often, I will do a deep dive on it one day. No promises as to when I will get to. I'll definitely get to this eventually, to a review, a test drive of the Mecha Hack Mission Manual one day. But my next test drives will be probably about some other game. We'll see. I don't have it in mind yet, and I don't even know that my next videos will be RPG test drives. I think it's been a long time since I've done a Crush Chronicles video, so I might do a Crush Chronicles video next. But those are my thoughts. And yeah, I really love Mecha Hack. If you are interested in buying this game, definitely check it out. I'll have a link in the description below of where you can get it. I would highly recommend it. It's $7 for the PDF and $13 for the physical book, if I remember right. That's just off the top of my head, though. But that will be linked below. Absolute Tabletop's a great company that deserves the money, and I think you deserve this great game. I'll also link, up here. Should be popping up a little bubble where you can watch the 2 previous test drive videos for Mecha Hack. If you're interested in seeing future content, especially about the Mecha Hack mission manual, subscribe so you can see when that comes out. If you like this test drive series and you want to show it, definitely leave a like below. And if you have extra thoughts about the Mecha Hack, if you liked it or didn't, why or why not? I'd love to hear from you guys if you have experience with it down in the comments below. But that is everything. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, ciao. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Josh's Boxes. My name is Josh, and today I forgot the little book that I was going to use for that intro.